Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Creatives of Windsor Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Sherdown, and today I'm sitting down with local photographer and filmmaker, Syx Langemann.
It's crazy. I'm sitting down with a local photographer and podcast maker.
Thanks for coming on. Like I was just saying, you're the first photographer on, which is cool.
No pressure.
But the project that we're, I guess, here to really talk about isn't really photography related so much as filmmaking.
No, it's kind of crazy how it's been 30 years in photography, a little more, and then things kind of come around. So, yeah.
Have you always done video work too?
No.
Really?
No. Actually, this is Windsor born. Should I say that? Like, really? Like, when I was in Vancouver, I mean, prior to me leaving, I left to Windsor in 99, went to University of Windsor, photography, fine art, and did that sort of stuff, and then moved out there and taught a couple of photo schools. So I was still using a camera in a stills mode pretty much until I left in 2015. And then in 2015, when I got back here, 2015, 2016, I started working with kind of a few local people, doing a little bit more like kind of being second camera, which was something that was, I mean, it was different for me, but I was coming back to here from a different place. And, 15 years, that's a whole lot of time.
Yeah.
So Gene Schilling was the first one that I actually did video with.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. At some of the like Fork and Corks or the music festivals that they'd have.
Yeah. Well, we got to work together with him last summer.
We did.
Hogs for Hospice.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Hope he does that again this year.
We will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot less hearing damage than sitting on a stage with, the Fork and Cork sound right in your ear.
I'd love to do that again this year. That was a super fun day. I love events like that.
Honestly, a great community event. And growing up in Leamington, Windsor, I kind of, a little bit of an affinity for those sorts of things. So
yeah, I like that. It was kind of like there was so much going on. Like at one point, like you guys went to like Point Pelee, and then I went to Kingsville to meet them there. And
yeah, there's like 3 or 4 locations that kind of have to be juggled through the day. Thank God I'm not necessarily the one handling the team. I'm just one of the cogs in the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a blast. I had fun out there. That was a long day. But those long days are cool.
Yeah. I know. You get through those lulls in the middle of the day where you're like, well, this is going to be a really long day. And then by you get into the second wind of things. And by the end of the day, it's like, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, just like shooting a wedding. It's like the second wind comes and you're good. You're not really tired when you leave.
It's usually after dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm always like the most tired, like, I don't know, like right before, well, it depends on how the day goes, but around like that 3 or 4 o'clock time.
Yeah.
And then...
You need your snack bar.
Yeah. Yeah, food's huge. I've been packing a lunch for years. It makes all the difference.
And you're a bigger person than I am, so you probably got to eat more.
Yeah, I eat all day on weddings. Just like every time I'm in the car, which is probably like every hour and a half, you're probably back in the car. I got to eat. Or if I'm like, every time I switch something, like groom's prep to brides, eat. Bride prep to like creative shoot, eat, That's what you got to do.
I sometimes eat. I usually just wait till dinner.
Really?
I keep my brain on work. I don't know.
Okay.
It might be the German in me. I showed up at exactly 7 o'clock and rang your doorbell.
You did?
Not 6:59 and not 7:01.
Is it always like that, or did you just luck out today?
No, it's always like that.
You're right on time?
Always.
Yeah?
I try. If I'm not early, then I'm late, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah, I'm usually always a couple minutes early. Just depends on what it is, I guess.
Where you got to go.
Yeah.
What you got to do.
Exactly. Okay, let's go. We have so much to talk about. Let's talk about spinning stories, which is like the biggest thing for you right now.
Really is. Honestly, it's been the biggest thing for me for about 2 years now. This was, kind of born of another thing. It's the second sort of step in a process to kind of talking to people and in my own way, in a kind of photography way, just doing portraits. That they just end up being live portraits. They end up having like a whole lot of stories attached to them. But yeah, this has been something over the last couple of years. I didn't really foresee myself in this situation, or kind of through the whole process that it went through. But I'm really glad that it's there. I'm happy that the cameras and the technology have kind of allowed me to progress through my, I guess, kind of creative stuff. I'm looking at your walls right now, and it's like, it's great because I can remember so many shots and I can remember so many moments. And then you flip that camera to kind of a video mode, and you realize like those moments are not like fractions of time anymore. You get to tell stories. You have a little bit more leniency with what you're doing.
Yeah, the story isn't like up for interpretation. It like a photo is.
No, you're kind of serving it in a different way, right? Like I hope that the way that I place some of those interviews puts the viewer in some of those situations that I think they're going to kind of like get the way the story is going to go. But definitely different than a photographer. You do your job when you're on the field, you do your job getting that shot, and then you come back, and we get to kind of polish that with the documentary over 2 years. It was not that at all.
Did you do any of the technical aspect? Like, were you manning any cameras, or were you like you were?
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. So I'm listed as the director, editor, camera guy, concept. Gavin Michael Booth is the producer. So he was there on a couple of shoots as well. So as a second camera, but there was a lot of times that I was alone. So essentially I had, kind of, similar to you, I had a couple cameras going on at the same time, trying to kind of time when those would stop recording, when, a battery would stop. So it was basically me in a room, setting up microphones, setting up the camera angles and thinking about that. So
I've watched half of them, and they're great. I do really like them. I love like videos like that, and I feel like the last couple of years it's been harder to find good ones. Like I feel like the type of videos that you made there for that, like the way you shot it was like, I don't know, just like over the last like 3 or 4 years, I haven't found a lot of like good ones I really liked, like I did from like 2014 to like 2020. I don't know why, but it's just like, it's not boring at all. I think like each episode's like the perfect amount of time. I like your narrating over it.
Wow. That's kind of interesting. That wasn't necessarily going to be a part of it when we started out. It was something that kind of Bell had a little bit more input on, was how much my voice and kind of, that I was seeing in the documentary.
Yeah, no, it was great. I like that you talk us through it. It's kind of like a soothing thing. It goes from episode to episode, and it helps it flow, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you got through 4 of it, so you can kind of feel there's an end of kind of talking to collectors, and then a little bit more of the technical, a little bit more of the band. So it does have its ebb and flow, and there's different kind of themes or topics that go through the episodes.
I always think this way, and I've said this a lot, and this documentary like really proves it, is everybody says like there's nothing going on in Windsor, or it's so small. Like I'm watching this and I'm like, where is that place, or who's this person? Like, and they're all out in the community and the scene too, and I've never even met them or been to their record store. And like I go to places like that, and it's so cool to when things bring light to other things in our community.
We have an amazing place. And, I did move away, but I'm one of those people who have come, like, I've come back. I've come back with my family, and I choose to make this the place that I live in. Windsor has definitely not gotten a great rap over the years. We have our kind of, just like the documentary, we have our ebb and flow of where things are going to go. But there's a lot of people in Windsor who, what's the best thing in Windsor? And it's like, get out. And it's like, that's... unfortunately, the thing that took me away in '99, the attitude of either I'm going to settle here and I'll be here forever, or I'll get out. And I kind of got out at that time, and I realized being away that, this city has a lot to offer, and there's a whole lot of community here that's really tight knit. We're I guess maybe a kind of small big city, a big small town. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We're in between, and we're definitely, in the shadows of places like Detroit, or Toronto or London, where people kind of go there and then they come back here. One of the things that was really funny when I was moving back here, I talked to another photographer about the, different parts of the industry that in Ontario that he was making money. He was a wedding photographer. He also shot a lot of kind of commercial stuff. And he's like, if you can treat like the area you live in here as like a bat cave, where you live here and then you go out and do work and then you kind of come back and people don't need to know where you live, it's going to be okay. But Windsor's got a lot of talent. It really always has. You know, I started working at the Loop, the Coach and Horses in 1993, doing sound for bands and live sound. I mean, at that point in time, I was still doing artwork at Common Ground and Art Site. You know, so we've always had kind of this this musician kind of art. We have a great kind of culture here. It's just that it definitely gets looked past a lot. So it's nice that I get to do something like this where I'm talking with people from the community. I mean, it's a whole different end than what I'm used to. But understanding that we have a whole lot of really great stuff around here. And I think even what you're doing, there's a lot of other people doing it that are really trying to highlight those things. And that's important. It's important to keep doing, no matter what community you're in. The culture doesn't build when people are quiet. Mm-hmm. So if you talk about where you're at, you talk about things that are going on, then just more people are going to hear about it.
Yeah, and I feel like lately there's been a lot of new cool stuff like highlighting the city. Like there's Tracy from the YQG and Bloom podcast. And then there's people like Roxana Rangel, like My Traveling Backpack. Mm-hmm. And then there's like a bunch of others like her. There's that Traveling Beach, I think. Yep. Kathleen Beach. And then there's the Nina girl. She does the similar stuff too.
Yeah. There's a whole other side to my personality where I make sandwiches for my wife. So we end up following all these, all of these other people that are kind of putting out the food and the culture of Windsor. So, a little bit adjacent to what I did with Spinning Stories, because, you talk to record people and music people, and that's what they really want to talk to. But there's a lot of people in the community kind of touting what's going on here and really trying to push that.
Mm-hmm. So let's go. So Spinning Stories, how did that come about originally? Or maybe explain kind of like what it is and what you did so people know.
What it is and why it happened is essentially where it started. When I first moved out, that's ASMR right there.
It's been 15 minutes. We got to do it. Cheers.
I
love it in a mic.
Yeah. I've always been involved in music. So 1994, I started working at Loop and Coach and Horses doing the front of the house sound. I ran a tattoo shop kind of around the block from where we worked. So all the bands would come in and they'd drop off CDs. I'd take them to work, and thank God this was a time of like CD changers of like hundreds of CDs that you could just kind of put in, and then your day was set. And then we moved kind of streaming. But I've always been involved in music. So I moved out of here in 1999, moved to Vancouver, and I kind of shot a little bit of the music scene. I did a little bit of work that way. It kind of dropped off, but the music scene, I think at that point, it also had a little bit of a lull where everybody was like, it was Napster, it was trading and that sort of stuff. So, when I came back to Vancouver, when I came back from Vancouver, I wanted to kind of, my wife and I had talked about having records or having a record player, but we also had small children. So I lost a few lenses to small children pulling my cameras off tables and stuff like that. And
we still love them.
I do still love them, but man, those scars are still there. But we kind of talked about things like our record collection or CD collection. Moving back and forth across the country, you got to be as light as you can. So when I moved back here from Vancouver in 2015, I even got rid of CD collections. I got rid of a whole bunch of stuff. So coming back here and then kind of purchasing, let's call it our forever home. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But we have a place that we aren't going to necessarily move from. We're not going to have to pack up and be in a different place in a couple of years. That was the time that opened it up to kind of like things like, honestly, even like collecting the artwork from the city and realizing that you could put it on walls and it didn't have to be transported in the next couple of years. So that sort of collecting started to happen. And in 2017 and 18, I was working with another group of people. We were called Pretty in the Algorithm, and we were doing a bunch of stuff that was really just trying to push what was going on in the city. And that was kind of spawned through the AVB podcast, AJ, that I had worked on when I came back from Vancouver. So, he talked with a lot of music people, people in the community, and I really liked what he was doing in a podcast. And then as we moved into kind of what I was doing with Pretty in the Algorithm, we decided to do a little tiny 10-minute documentary on Record Store Day. That was 2018. We started to film. So it was specifically on Record Store Day at Dr. Disc, and we had a set group of questions that we kind of asked everybody and just went through the day. And, you know, they had bands playing at the time. There was a whole lot of stuff going on. The event was an event. So this for us was, you know, kind of a neat time to make something that may not have been there before, also to highlight the community, talk to locals, have a little bit of fun. And we finished that off probably just before COVID hit. And that documentary was kind of the inspiration or a little bit of the impetus of what kind of progressed into Spinning Stories. I really enjoyed, you know, again, talking with people that were collecting records. I like getting involved in the community of specifically like collecting records, that physical format of music. I collected music a lot. I dealt with music a lot, but, you know, that end of collecting was really interesting to me. All of a sudden, through that documentary, I realized there was some really interesting stories, great collectors, great stories, the reasons why they collected, the reasons why it was specifically records that they were looking for. So that definitely piqued my interest. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, kind of pull in the fact that I worked for the Drive magazine and Dave Hunter was at that point in time taking back over the magazine and definitely music oriented. You know, I mean, Dave was a big proponent of music. He loved it. He loved records. And all of a sudden, this kind of was like these talks with Dave sometimes and these talks with my wife, like, if I started collecting records, how can I make this how can I make this a business and write it off? Or how can I make this interesting enough that it's like, it's not just me doing something on my own? Because, you know, music is bigger than us and collecting is bigger than us. So it kind of like, it rolled around in my brain for a little bit. And as I started to collect more and more and talk with people about the idea, you know, when you speak things out loud, all of a sudden they materialize. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of really how it happened. I started the Record Story or the Record Day documentary way back in 2017, 18, that idea. And then that kind of further influences those other things.
How did, so like, obviously the drive is a big part of it because whenever the episode starts, it says the drive and everything.
Yeah.
And I know you've been working for them for a while and I shoot from them time to time as well. And they're great over there. What is their role in this? Like, what are they in this documentary?
The Drive magazine is a series sponsor. So Black Frame Studios is my little company. So myself, Black Frame Studios, in conjunction with Bell 5 TV1, they were the ones that gave us, you know, a major portion of funding. They fund community projects in different locales in, like, you know, different parts of the world or different parts of Canada. So the CRTC has money that kind of turns on in certain areas. So when we pitched this, they gave money to make sure that essentially all the production was handled. And what the Drive magazine came in was more as a series sponsor as well. So as we go through and kind of promote some of this and make sure that it's out there on TV, that other people are hearing about it, they came in as a major sponsor for that. So it was a little bit in the, you know, kind of a legacy of Dave Hunter. Also a little bit of my connection of working with them. But I think that, you know, all of us lost a good friend with Dave, and there was great stories to tell. Dave is a big part of this documentary, so he holds almost like one whole episode. I'm sure out there he's laughing somewhere. but I think it was a nod for all of us to kind of make sure that, you know, this wasn't, you know, it's not just a record story and a whole bunch of collectors. There are other things that went on here, and Dave was one of those guys that supported the idea, thought it was great and crazy, and always shared these stories with me. He also gave me a really great deal on my first record player. So, you know, I kind of blame him for starting this with me, and I think it is only fitting that he's at the beginning of every episode. Yeah,
it's very interesting. It's really nice to see him in all the videos and everything, and I have the podcast episode with him, and sometimes they're like hard to watch, I guess, but it's also nice to have that stuff too, right?
Yeah. There was about 2 months that I couldn't really look at the documentary after he had passed. I lost my mother earlier in September, the September after we started it. So we started this in April 23rd of whatever year.
2 years ago. 2022.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah. And then my mother passed away in September, which was difficult, and, adjusted, and I moved on. And then when we lost Dave again in the next summer, it was kind of, I just had to put the documentary down a little bit. It was hard to kind of look through some of those episodes with Dave and with Sammy. But one of the things that actually made me think about is I really wish I had more video of my mom. Like, I wish I had more video of people. And it is some of those things, like it's hard to watch right after it happens. But after some of that reality kind of sets in, you realize you're, kind of pretty blessed to have those moments. And I'm lucky to have had a camera, and I'm lucky to have caught his voice and see those interactions between him and Sam. So, as photographers and videographers, I always joke we're like accidental historians, and you never know that some of those moments that you get, like those little tiny moments that you think are, this is good, this is cute, this is a beautiful shot. You don't know where those are going to go later.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It's funny, I spend so much time, let's talk about my personal work. I spend so much time documenting certain things or things that I'm interested in, like a lot of surfing cultures or different towns or places in the world, but I never really focus a lot on the things that I love, deep inside, like your family. I've never really shot any photos of them or anything like that, and it's kind of really odd. I don't know why I haven't, because there is some really famous photographers that have, like Larry Sultan. He has that book. I have it inside, where he photographed his parents through their retirement and old age. Yeah. And it's amazing. Yeah. Even from somebody who doesn't know them, but I could imagine for him and for his family, it's great to have. My mom just had heart surgery last week. She's all good. Everything was great. But when I was going to the hospital, I was like, should I bring a camera and document this? It's kind of this thing. I didn't do it, but maybe I should. maybe I should, start doing something like that.
We were talking about DSLRs and everything before this started. And my first mirrorless camera was essentially because of that. My mom, 15 years ago, it was 2008 or 2009, maybe 2010. But I was coming home from Vancouver to see her during a major operation. And the idea was, well, I'm going to bring a camera. I brought my Nikon D3, which is this huge beast of a camera. And, that was with me every day. It was with me in her room. It was with me when she kind of first woke up. I photographed, doctors giving her medicine. And
oh, wow.
It was, I'm very glad I have the photos, and I'm glad I did it. But that was the reason why I was like, I'm going to buy a smaller mirrorless camera, so it's not so huge, and I can kind of sneak some of those photos in. But I'm really glad I did. And those moments are, it's really weird to kind of think about the things that you do, and the things that you do are because of you and your travels. And sometimes that nod back to your family and your parents doesn't, always happen. It's always like what's going on out there as opposed to kind of what's happening here. Mm-hmm. And I'm lucky to have had probably a few couple instructors and people I've met in my life that were very big photographers, huge photographers doing major things, and asking them things like what's your most important photo? What are you excited about doing next? And a lot of them was like getting back to my family. I'd like to just get home, or talking about their most important photo being like the last photo of their mom, and that sort of thing. So it made me reflect a lot. We can have the rock star kind of job being a great photographer, or, going out and doing these great things and surfing all around the world. But sometimes it just comes back to those things that are like right at home. Mm-hmm. And, it's hard to sometimes be the jerk that pulls out the camera, but, yeah, I'm happy that I was that jerk sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I, even just documenting Windsor more, like when I first started a photographer, I obviously lived here and I was young and didn't have any money, and I just obviously shot in Windsor because what else am I going to shoot? And then as like my career progressed and everything, and my projects started to just grow, and I got to a point where I'm at now where I don't make any personal work here. I go away every few months and I shoot like crazy, and then I come back and I spend a few months working on it all. And then I start to run down, and then I head back out and I do it again. And last year I started going for walks around here, just shooting film. And those photos have been really good, actually.
Yeah.
Doesn't like, I'm liking it, and I am about to start diving more into that again. Hopefully over the next few weeks and maybe throughout the whole summer. But my travel plans and everything, I should be going on a trip in a couple weeks, and I'm not. I'm taking a gap right now. I'm really into being at home right now. Just
home's not a bad place to be.
No.
I'm trying to remember in my brain who it was exactly that said this at one of my photo classes in Vancouver. Larger photographer who was in and kind of talking about his work, and he said like some of the best photos that you're going to make are going to happen like 200 meters from your house. They're going to be the places you see every day. They're going to be the things that you notice like the most, that you see those changes in. And you know, that kind of resonated with me too. You know, when I was in Vancouver, it was still not really, you know, I was 15 years there, but it wasn't home. So when I was even traveling around my neighborhood, I still felt like it was, you know, a little bit of a tourist kind of in that, you know, photographic end. But, you know, realizing where you are at home and photographing that, you know, you've got your own perspective here too, you know, and I think that that's important to share just as much as, you know, you going somewhere else where those people see this as home and they don't find it all that interesting. No. You know, I'm not sure they'd come to Windsor and be like, wow, this is an amazing place to shoot. But I think that some people kind of just get bored about, you know, where they are. You know, it's that feeling, I tell my class, it's that feeling when you come home from vacation and you walk into your house. You've been gone for 2 weeks and you didn't realize that the sunlight hit like the corner of your room that way, or that your house had this smell, or, you know, like all those sorts of like things that kind of make home, you don't realize because you take them for granted. So, you know, making those little photos of those little moments are pretty cool.
My favorite thing about coming home from a trip is coming back in here.
Yeah.
Opening the door and being like, home.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
You know.
Yeah, that's like your walls are filled with your stuff, you know, and I'm the same way. Like that's where my negatives sit. That's where my computer sits. And there's a lot of comfort in that.
I can do everything here except shoot. But we got to leave to do that. But, you know, that's the nice thing about what we do is...
No surfing.
No surf. I do surf here, actually.
Where?
Lake Erie.
That's cold.
It's cold. It's very cold. But there's a couple beaches nearby. Like there's one near Point Pelee, and then Erio, like the town of Erio. We've been there. Yeah. Fantastic spot to surf, actually. Oh, wow. Yeah. It's just cold.
You're not going to catch me there.
It's actually like surf season's like starting right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you're wasting time with me. I appreciate that.
You can surf all winter, but it's like a little too cold for me.
I've watched guys in Vancouver do that, like off Tofino, off the coast of Tofino. So I've been up there a couple times and watching those people. Oh, I don't know. Surfing with icicles on you is not, I don't know, it's not inviting.
I've surfed here in December.
Wow.
Well, water can only really be so cold, right? It can only really be about 0 degrees and then it starts to freeze. So like I've surfed in that. It's wetsuits are amazing. You're actually surprised. Like you walk out and you're like, oh, I don't even feel it. And then it hits you in the face and it goes in and it's cold. But then your body warms it up. But it's really cold when you get out because you got to take the wetsuit off outside in the parking lot. And that's
I'm not
cold.
down with that at all.
Yeah.
No.
A friend of mine, he surfs like weekly, at least weekly, multiple times a week. He lives in Harrow, kind of like right by Sprucewood.
Okay, yeah.
And he's out all the time. There's only a few of us that surf here, and he's out the most. And I'll surf with him all spring, summer, and fall. But when he goes in the winter, I think he does this. I know a lot of people do this. They'll get like a big pitcher of water, and they'll boil water and pour it in there at home. And then when they get to the beach and put their wetsuit on, they'll dump it inside.
Oh, wow.
So then they're all
so it just warms already.
And then it's already filled with water now, so then you just go out.
Well, this is my new trick for next winter. I'm just going to be walking around with a wetsuit all through the city.
Wetsuits are convenient too, because like I have one now, obviously for surfing, but it allows me to I can go kayaking in the winter. You can go to like Pesh Island when nobody's there.
These are also things I don't do.
Yeah, you don't ever go out to the islands.
Not as much as I should. I think honestly, like, you know, being back from Vancouver, I travel a lot out there, and, you know, getting back here, Point Peely, I haven't done enough. No, but that's being the tourist back, you know, back where you live, and enjoying where you live, and understanding that even Windsor has its own, you know, kind of crazy geography that doesn't exist a whole lot. And, you know, we should travel around and do that, but Peche Island's on my list.
Have you ever been?
No.
Really?
No.
Well, they got the ferry now, so you don't have to take a kayak. The city has a ferry.
I think I'd look really good in that wetsuit. I might have to take a kayak, but yeah.
Hey, you should go check it out. You'll be there, and you'll feel like you're up north on a trip camping or something.
Yeah, just in the middle of nowhere.
Like, am I at home right now? It's beautiful there. There's so many different parts of the island. There's the beach on the front side, then there's different beaches on the back side, and then there's like the old ruins from Hiram Walker's homes. There's an old like cobblestone bridge. There's like a whole inlet that you can swim in, and it's great.
There you go.
Lots of poison ivy.
Ticks and poison ivy.
I got poison ivy there last year.
Awesome.
There's deer all over the island. I think we saw a beaver one time. I was like, I don't know how the deer got there or how long they've been there for, but
They can swim.
can they?
Yeah.
So that's how you think. So they just swam out there, eh?
I'm pretty sure. I think they're like horse and moose. Like, they all swim.
Yeah, they do swim.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
This is way above my pay grade on nature.
Sorry, let's go back to music.
I do know that.
What do you play? Do you play anything? You're an observer.
No, I used to play bass.
Oh, okay.
And so I probably started playing bass when I was, I want to say 15, 16 years old. I played for a little while. And then when I got the job at the Loop and Coaching Horses, and I was doing front of house sound for all these bands, the last thing I wanted to do is like go home and sound like shit. I was like, why did they make it look so easy? It's like, and so I just kind of stopped. I put that away, and I ended up just being part of the crew that helps to entertain, you know, I mean, and support. So there's always a band on the stage, but I did sound and I did lights, and I really enjoyed that end of things, you know, and obviously the collecting of it. So photography, you know, we'll bring that back in a little bit, but yeah, I was never really a big player. Yeah. And I got fat, stumpy fingers. So like I could never play guitar. Ukulele is out. Like they don't make them fat enough for this hand.
It's funny. Music, I say, is like one of the things I love the most in the world. Like, and it's one of the only things that I don't do myself. You know, like everything else I love, I try to do it in some way, even if I'm not good at it. Like, I love skateboarding. I'm not good at it, but I do it. I skate here and there.
Me too.
But music, I'm just like, I feel around on guitar every once in a while, but like, I do not play an instrument, and I love music. I listen to it all day long. Like, but I always say, like, my way into music is photography.
Yeah.
You know,
and see, my way into music was doing sound for them. So music, like photography of it was actually even second to that.
Okay.
And I really, you know, I like both ways into music. Now I'm 50 years old, and I sit and watch like American Idol, and I cry at the entrance, and I cry like when they're trying to do their, like, can I get in? Do you get a golden ticket? And it's like that, I don't know, that shit makes me well up. It's this watching people with this like crazy amount of talent that all of a sudden realize they have this talent. And I think there's a lot of musicians out there. That was the biggest thing, even sitting behind the soundboard some nights. Like, it may not be music that I'm interested in, like not necessarily my genre. It's not my pick, but all of a sudden, like I'm 4 songs into the night, and I'm like, I'm tied to watching these people play on stage, because either, you know, one person's got this amazing passion or this great voice, or the band and the way they work together has this connection, and you're sitting and witnessing something that is like, it's happening right there. And it's not going to happen in a kind of singular moment. It's not going to happen outside of that. So I really think that music for me is kind of that, you know, I really enjoy watching it for that, you know, being in the moment and really watching people do what it is that they want to do. Like, you know, that sort of inside, I don't know. What do you call that? Like that push, that impetus, that talent, that need to get something out. And I don't know. I relate to it as a photographer. You know, I relate to that struggle trying to like, you know, create something that somebody understands. So maybe it's something being adjacent to that sort of creative talent that I really like. And since I can't play, it's also the awe factor of like, wow, that's amazing. You don't want to hear me sing, you know? So, I mean, it's definitely things like that just blow me away.
Yeah.
And I love hearing that on records and that sort of stuff. So
you've been shooting any shows like recently?
Yes and no. Not anything like I used to do. I mean, Vancouver was a different kind of hub of things, and you know, here moving back to Windsor.
Is that where you shot a lot in Vancouver?
Yeah, there was a lot. So you know, I mean, there were things I got to do in Vancouver, and there was opportunities I got to that were literally presented to me, and it happened because of not only my social circle of other photographers, but like you're in a city that everybody travels to. Windsor is, you know, one border away, so we don't necessarily get some of those bands. So, you know, I've shot some shows here. It's a little different, but it's also different. Like it's also different timing and like the size of the shows. So, you know, the whole, like very hard in Windsor when you're dealing with bigger shows, like 3 songs, you're kind of done. You're left with this kind of like 2.5 foot pit that just like goes along the front of the stage, and you're like, well, I'm not going to get anything here different than anyone else is going to get. And that's one of the things that kind of, I think as a photographer, kind of pushes me too. Like, how am I going to show you something different? How am I going to show you something from my perspective when I can't give you a perspective that's different than what everybody else is going to give, you know? In Vancouver, I got to do, like, one of my highlight shows was doing the Pixies. So not sure if you know them or not.
Yeah.
But it was a reunion tour, and one of my friends, they have a blog and they write a lot. So she asked me to come along and do some photos, which I thought, you know, this is great. And I loaded myself up with an obscene amount of camera gear, you know, like 3 cameras, one 300 mil lens, like a 70 to 200 and a wide angle lens. And I got my 3 songs, and I'm now going to like out myself on a podcast, but I got my 3 songs. I ran around the building as much as I could. And then little secret for other photographers, I ran to the washroom with all my gear. So after the 3rd song was over, I waited until about the 4th song and came back out of the washroom, and the security guards had already cleared the area. And I got to go back out to my kind of 4th row ticket space that I had with all my gear, which was kind of a big no-no. But I got some pretty great shots of Frank Black and being in the 4th row. You know, there's situations like that where you just like, you kind of realize you're like, I'm in a moment right here, and I'm going to take some risks, and I want to try and get those shots. Windsor just hasn't really offered me much of those opportunities. I know they exist across the border a little bit more. That's a whole other hurdle, but, you know, shooting across the border is a whole different thing. But, you know, I like the local bands playing in Windsor. I've shot a lot of them. I like the energy. I think it's just like teaching photography. Like, I can go and photograph a huge band, you know, let's throw out some good Windsor ones, you know, Tea Party, Big Sugar, etc. I just went to go and see Queens of Stone Age, and you're like, your photos are going to turn out pretty damn decent. Good lighting, great band. They know their stage presence. But when you kind of cut it back to those local bands that are all of a sudden playing shows, I remember one just getting out of COVID, and I went to go and see at Villains, grabbed my camera, you know, wide angle lens. And it was the first show I had been to after COVID. And I'm sitting down in front of the stage and kind of shooting low and wide. And the singer decides to do a whole like kind of cartwheel off the stage and smacks me in the face, kicks my camera like kind of out of my face. I like roll over, and he goes on with the show. And then I finish off my shooting, move to the side stage, and he comes up after and he's like, did I hurt you? I'm so sorry. And I was like, that is the best physical contact I've had in 2 years at a music show. Like, I'm totally here for it. So I really like that kind of full contact, full environment of of shooting bands. You know, you've got to be in the moment. You got to be there. You got to be ready to kind of, you know, get those shots. So when I moved here, it just ended up being like way more local stuff, way more like kind of smaller band stuff. So when people say like, have you shot shows? It's like, yeah, I've shot shows, but they aren't arena shows. These aren't people that you necessarily like are going to be, you know, collecting their records of, but these are shows I enjoyed being out at.
I've shot a lot of big bands in Detroit, like you talked about, but I think those photos are cool, more so just because of who the photos are of. They're famous. Yeah. But the good photos like of people playing are at like Fog. Yeah. And local bands, like that's where you get good stuff. I kind of have a crossover, so I haven't shot a lot of music in the last few years, especially because of COVID. And I'm starting to get back into it, and I'm shooting my first show in Detroit on Sunday, and I haven't shot there in like over 4 years. And I'm shooting this like surf rock band from Australia. Okay. And they're playing at PJ's Lager House. Yeah. Yeah. So it's gonna be like a mix. Like that's gonna be like a smaller local show, but like not with like a local band. I don't know. It's gonna be like a medium thing, and I'm really excited for that. And I've been applying to some like bigger bands again. So
yeah, it's funny. I think it's like, you know, it is riding a bike. Like you don't forget what you were doing. Those lights on the stage don't change from what they did like 5 or 10 years ago, other than their LED as opposed to like an incandescent burning bulb, which totally messes with your shutter speed. But that's just a photography geek thing on the whole side of things.
Fucking red lights.
Oh, but yeah, the red and the blue. But man, I think those local shows, they just have so much energy. And when I look at photos, when I look back at photos, like I love skateboarding photos too, and I love band photos. Like, you know, I pull up my Fugazi records or like Soundgarden, and the fact is like the reason why some of this, like, there's so much energy in this, like the photographer was right in there, like. They were part of everything that was happening. And then to kind of move us back and, you know, you get a little bit more of that, you know, it's a distance. The photographer's not really part of what's going on in the show. We're photographing the show, but we're not there. And I really, really like those times when, you know, and still now, 50 years old, I love getting on the stage. I love getting in the way, it literally like almost of the band. It's like, that's how you put the person who's viewing your photos in those places that they would never exist before. It's like be in a place that it's sometimes not comfortable, you know, and get in there and shoot that. So I like those sorts of things too. And that's what small shows allow you to do. They, you know, most of those bands, when you're going in, they're like, whatever, just come on in, shoot whatever you want to shoot. Like whatever. Yeah. And that's a, you know, that's a pass or a ticket that you're not going to get at bigger shows.
No. Like you said, it's sneaking your camera kind of. I did that at Mac DeMarco at Royal Oak Music Theater. I kept my camera with me in my seat, and I got a photo of him crowd surfing at the end of the night. Like the audience with the spotlight on him. Like it's fantastic.
I know. But you shouldn't have had that shot. Yeah. But the thing is, it turns out, and that's the thing that kind of pushes you to make more photos, keep the camera in your hand, and you know, be in those places that you shouldn't be sometimes.
I got one of my first bigger shows. I got yelled at by their manager, whatever. So it was in February 2016. So it was over 6 years ago now, which is insane. Hutch opened for Simple Plan at Walkerville Theater, and I'm good friends with them. So I was there with them from like sound check all day. I was backstage with them. I got to go like on stage with Hutch. I got to go in the pit, whatever. And then for Simple Plan, I think we were just supposed to be in the pit for 3 songs, like the deal. But we're in Windsor, and those security guards, like they don't do shows like that all the time. It's not like the Fillmore where every day they have a show. They know exactly the rules. So I'm backstage already. And I'm walking out, Simple Plan's going on, and the lead singer grabs me. He's like, "What's the radio station that's putting this on?" I forget. And I told him it was Mix 96.7. And he's like, "Thanks, man." He's like, "All right." And he runs on stage. And then I was like, Like the security guard kind of saw me talking to him, so he didn't bug me. And then I was like, I'm just going to fucking go on stage. So I just go on stage with Simple Plan, and somebody comes and grabs me. They're like, "Hey, you can't be on fucking stage. What the hell? They're like in the pit. So I go in the pit for like, I was on stage for one song, in the pit for two. And so I shoot the two, and then I go out to the crowd now, and I'm shooting from the crowd. And this guy grabs me. He's like, come outside. And he's like, man, what the fuck? Like, you were on stage with my band. He's like, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know, I'm sorry. I was like, I didn't know I couldn't go on stage. I don't know. Like, I'm just doing my thing.
Get out of jail free card. That's what your camera is.
Yeah.
Like, honestly.
And he's like, you better not write anything bad about my band. And I'm like, dude, I'm a 19-year-old college student. Like, I don't give a shit to write anything bad about your band. I'm just excited to take pictures. And he's like, all right. He's like, thanks for being cool. He's like, I'm sorry for getting mad at you. He's like, you know, but a lot of times, he's like, here's my card. He gave me his card. He worked for Warner Brothers. And I was like, damn.
Yeah.
And then one of the girls from this radio station who yelled at me for being on the stage, she comes up after. She's like, I had to get mad at you because that's my job. She's like, but I appreciate you taking the risk.
That's the thing. They can't say it on record, but sometimes like they appreciate those photos that are all of a sudden going to turn up, and they're like, you know, especially if you weren't a jerk about it. You know what I mean? Like,
I listened.
I kind of was like, I thought this was good. Mm-hmm. I literally have like, you know, I have a couple of show stories where as a photographer, I probably shouldn't have been where I was. And one of them culminates into me like tripping over the cymbal stands and knocking the cymbals into the drummer. So that was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was bad news. Thank God it was my cousin.
I'm always afraid I'm going to unplug a cord
with
my feet,
you
know?
Yeah.
Fuck, imagine you unplug the master cord and shut off all the music. Oh my God.
Can't say that something close to that hasn't happened in my life. So yeah, I've stepped across a couple of amplifiers and actually, you know, unplugged a power bar that was powering the whole side of one thing. And you're like, oh, it's embarrassing. But, you know, live and learn.
Yeah. Because I'm always like trying to hide on stage as best I can. Like, I don't want to be annoying.
Dude, you're like, how tall are you?
Like 6'4".
You can't fucking hide on a stage. I'm like 5'7.5". I'll say 5'7" when I'm talking to bands, 5'8" I'm talking online. But yeah. You got to be tiny, dressed in black.
I do dress dark to, you know, kind of blend. It is hard when you're a fucking giant too to hide a little bit, but I try my best. I don't know. I feel bad in the pit when like people that paid like $1,000 for their ticket can't see.
You can't see past your big head and your huge camera. Yeah.
Actually, I shot Iron and Wine at Royal Oak. No, in Ann Arbor somewhere. Anyway, I'm the only photographer there. I was like, oh, that's cool. Some of the best photos ever. That was like that one might have been one of the best shows I've ever seen in my entire life. It was beautiful.
Wow. Have the whole thing for you. That's nice.
Yeah. So I'm up there and this girl's like, are you going to be here the whole show? And I was like, no. I was like, I'm only here. It was like no pit. It was like a side thing. I was like, I'm only here 3 songs and I'm gone. I was like, I'll move over here. I'll crouch, whatever. I won't be in your way. And she's like, we paid a lot of money for these seats. And I was like, yeah, it's all right. She got the security guard to kick me out. So I had to shoot this show from like a weird spot. I still got good photos. It was all good. Yeah, people.
Note to the audience, 5'8" and under. That never happened.
What's your favorite music if you had to like pick either a band or like a genre or like a time period?
Probably like heavier stoner rock, mid 90s sort of stuff. But yeah, like I'm all over the map, but definitely like I started out with you know, kind of Caius, Queens of the Stone Age, you know, which now filters into a whole lot of different genres. You know, Josh Homme is involved in a lot of stuff, and it kind of changed from what it was in the early 90s. But that was probably, you know, my biggest thing. I mean, I'm 50 years old, so, you know, Kurt Cobain's death in Nirvana was a huge, huge thing for kind of my musical taste, like things like Pearl Jam and hearing them come out.
You were like 20, right?
Yeah,
around that time?
I was born in 73, so 93, I was essentially 20 years old. So those are, you know, important times.
Yeah.
But yeah, nowadays, the same thing. But there's a little bit more kind of, I married my wife loves fucking folk, and she loves kind of her own kind of indie stuff. So that's really filtered right into my listening. And the funny part is, kind of, a little bit of getting back to this music and record collecting is I realize that there's some crossovers there. Like, what I like in music and what she likes in music, there's some crossovers. And, Mark Lanigan is one of them. So Mark Lanigan has played with a whole lot of bands. Screaming Trees was the earliest one, but then Isabel Campbell, who is from the Bell and Sebastian sort of
I'm
group
seeing them
of
next
things.
Sunday.
That's amazing. So like, from Mark Lanigan to kind of the stoner rock Screaming Trees crosses over to Isabel Campbell, and all of a sudden you have this like great record between these two people. And I think that, music is like, it's crazy like that. Like the crossovers that start happening.
I like Eddie Vedder with his like solo stuff.
Which I don't follow, but I mean, I appreciate. I appreciate all this stuff with solo stuff, with people playing with, with the odd kind of one-offs that you just don't expect.
Yep.
I love that about music,
I love when they do things that you're just like, they did that? Like so Eddie Vedder, like his, when he did the soundtrack for Into the Wild, the movie, is like one of the best folk records of all time. It's amazing. And it's not like Pearl Jam.
No.
But yeah, I like, have you heard Post Malone play country music?
Yes.
It's incredible.
Fucking that guy has got so much goddamn talent. I really don't know where he came up from and like where the hell he's going to go. But what he does literally outside of his music career is the stuff I'm interested in. Cause it's all of this tangent stuff that he touches on these people and the genre or this or that. And you're like you're so good at all of it, but wouldn't be surprised if there's a country album coming out from Post Malone soon.
Yeah, I think he's doing something. I'm sure you saw him do the Kurt Cobain thing during COVID, right? The Nirvana thing.
So did you know that there's another tie to Windsor?
In that?
Yeah.
What? Who? What is it? Is it the guy playing bass?
No. We have Joe Hello, which was George Hello was a producer from Windsor. He used to run a thing called Polaris Studios on Drouillard. Mm-hmm. His son, Joe Hello, also kind of kept up with sound. And Joe Hello is literally the sound guy for Post Malone when he tours. So when they did the whole COVID, I guess it was New Year's Eve sort of thing. Was that what it was?
It was when, I don't know.
It was right around New Year's. It was right around that.
So
but
he's wearing the dress and Travis Barker's playing drums. Yeah.
Well, if you watch, we got a little Windsor boy running around making sure that all that sound like kind of happens. So like Windsor, again, our tie to music runs deep. And a lot of people don't necessarily know that, but Joe Hello was the sound guy that basically made all of that shit happen for the rest of the world based out of Windsor.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I know. I mean, like doing all these, like all of this talk with so many people, so many different genres, people would bring up things about Windsor and who lives here and why they live here. And it just kind of, it blows me away. There is a lot of talent here. Mm-hmm. And, like you said earlier, it's just like, well, why don't people kind of get it? And I think it's like, cause sometimes, I don't know, Windsorites might have a little bit of a loud mouth and a boasty side to us. But sometimes when you're involved with really amazing people, we learn to take the back seat and let them have their kind of like, let them have their stardom, let them have their limelight. And we're just there in the background.
Yeah, I would say the people who complain are the ones you hear the most because the people that like things usually don't say much.
Sorry.
So you think people hate something when in reality, it's not so much the case. And you see that a lot of times even in like politics too. Like you'll see somebody hates them. Like you're like, oh, everybody hates this person, but then they win the election by a lot. It's like because the people that hate them are just really loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. We're not going to get into politics, but I just...
God, no, let's not get into politics.
I'm just saying.
I did that this morning on the radio. So.
Were you on with Dan this morning?
I was on with Dan this morning.
How often do you do that?
Often. Like, I'm surprised I get invited back, but it's often enough. It's once every other week or so. And, it's great to be on that. I appreciate always the opportunity of
Dan's the best.
Kind of voicing an opinion of people that live in cities and blah, 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 politics. But
Yeah, what do you guys talk about on there?
Too many politics.
Is it politics?
Well, it ends up being a lot of like local stuff, honestly. So it's like it's current news.
Yep.
So there's things that are going on in the news that we get to comment on, but some of it is kind of local and political. But
like local politics?
yeah.
I just had Lisa Gretzky was here a few weeks ago doing headshots.
Yes,
That's
awesome.
She's awesome.
Yeah. I've worked with Lisa a little bit in the past.
Yeah.
That's great.
She's super fun. She was playing Led Zeppelin on her phone. We're doing headshots, like right here in this spot.
But that's the thing. Honestly, you're getting above that kind of local. I mean, there's local. Like I know they're local, but they're also provincial local. So I mean, municipal is a whole other like bag of shit that sometimes honestly you don't want to deal with. But when you deal with like people that are also on a provincial level, like Lisa Gretzky is pretty great. Brian Massey, really great. Irick, doing a great job. But these aren't people that unfortunately they don't represent. The locals in the local, they're at a provincial end, so they're totally great. Our local politics.
You mean like city council or mayor type thing?
Yeah,
that's what I mean by local.
Yeah. City council and shit show.
I don't know enough about it.
You don't have to.
Or
honestly, just don't.
Like I know, you had Chris in the documentary.
Yeah.
Is he councilor right now or no?
No. When I first started the documentary, Chris was actually running for mayor. So he was the ward councilor for Ward 4 and then was running for mayor. We didn't make that. We didn't make the finish line there. So he retired from all kind of politics other than commenting on politics. But he did take up records and in a hard way.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, his collection when we actually recorded was, probably sitting around 600 and a lot of like inherited stuff from his uncle, which is a great story. And, to this day now, so we were 2 years beyond me kind of interviewing him, like to this day, he's like, so here's another 400 records I just picked up. And you're like, wow, you got a serious problem.
One of my favorites was Sheila and Eamon's basement. I've been to Sheila's, but I've never been inside, and I've heard about her basement.
She keeps you on the outside. You can't be in.
I was there one time. We picked her up, but I didn't go in. That was like the first time I met her. When she was on the podcast, she's like, "You never see my basement?" I was like, "No, but God. I've seen it now."
The basement is that when filming spinning stories. I know I was going into other people's like listening rooms or their collection rooms, and in a photographic way, I'm like, how am I going to kind of set this up? And then I walk down into their room and I'm like, well, I could just throw a camera on a floor and it's going to look amazing. Like I could turn around and it wouldn't even matter. But yeah, the collection that Sheila and Eamon together have kind of created, and that room that was, Sheila's older brothers and where she grew up, it's a great story. And you can see it in the room, and Sheila's personality, totally mirrors, what's there. And I think that's one of the cool things about doing a documentary like this. Like all of a sudden, things just go, and you're like, I get to talk to Eamon, I get to talk to Sheila, and I'm in this room, and there's so much musical knowledge, and there's so much kind of just passion about music and that stuff. And I love being able to share that. Unfortunately, again, when I was doing the interview, Sheila had to leave because she was doing stuff with, I don't know, the Trailer Park Boys. I don't know. Do you know them? No. So she had a huge interview. She had to leave my interview for their stuff. But I got to talk with Eamon, and Eamon ended up being he's a transplant to Windsor from another area, and a huge musical talent.
He's too good.
And one of the things that honestly, I was talking with him about music before I was learning about all of his music. Mm-hmm. So it just blew me away. Some of the insight that he had and some of the things that he said, one of the best quotes in the documentary, which I think may have hit the cutting room floor, is that, a record collection is like a tattoo on your soul.
Yeah.
Whether you want it, to be alphabetically organized or whatever, that's totally up to you. And insights like that and those little tiny kind of quotes, that's what made the documentary, really, really special to me.
Yeah, actually, before you came here, I just asked Eamon to be on.
Oh, yeah?
Because when I had Sheila on, he came, and I only have one mic, so I couldn't have him on. And then I was like, I want to have you on, though. But I hadn't listened to his music too much, and then Sheila's like, you gotta. And then I started listening to his music. Okay, it's the end of April. I've been listening to him since, like, November.
Yeah.
Like, beginning mid-November, and, like, I listened to him, like...
Are you streaming it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I can talk about 4 albums because I have them, but the rest of the 30?
He's got a lot.
A huge amount, like very prolific and in different kind of ways, right? But yeah, fantastic. Like I really did. I stuck to the vinyl. I interviewed him and I was like, what do you have? And he handed me vinyl, and that's pretty much what we listened to. But there's some pretty amazing records that he's put out. I think he's probably one of the only ones that I own right now that I own a test pressing of, and one of the more expensive records that I got. So a test pressing, when they're pressing records, similar to in our photo world, when you get a lab, they give you like 10 free prints, and you get to kind of mess around with these free prints, but they'll give you 5 free pressings, which is basically for you to kind of listen to, what they did, if the master, the mother, father, all those sort of, if everything is in line and it sounds good, then they run through and they make your press. Well, Eamon decided that with his latest press, he was going to take those 5 pressings, which they're usually on, they have white labels on them. They're usually no information. It's just like white labels and then a record, and it gets sent to you. So he started to do one-off artwork on the covers and coat the covers, which was really amazing, and stamp the records. So there's 5 records that were test pressings that he sold. And they were a little expensive. They were sold at $100 a piece, but I got one of them. I got one of 5. And, the rest of them are multiple pressings with the regular casing. But it's pretty special to kind of own something like that, where it's like the artist got this first. They got to hear these records first, and this is what everything else was approved from.
It's funny that you bring that up with them, because so like Sheila, I guess, manages Hutch, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And before she was even around with them, I went with Hutch in 2016 to Toronto to like this brewery. They played a show, and there was a guy there, and he was recording the set and cutting it to 45s as they were playing all the bands throughout the day. So he did like 5, these just little plastic 45s for Hutch, and they gave me one. I have it. It was like one, is it slightly messed up? I don't remember, but it's in my little record collection. Really? And like, I'm one of the only people, I think Sash was on. He's like, dude, I don't even have that. So I was like, I got it. He's like, you can borrow it, but
you can listen to it,
but yeah,
I know the band.
It was like just one of their songs from their first LP.
That's cool.
Yeah. It is
like
cool.
that live to record idea, like Third Man is kind of pushing it. There's a few people that are pushing it, but this idea, like there's several different ways of making a record, which is, there's a hidden one here, but lathe cutting records is essentially what that guy was doing. So as the music comes in, it's going out to a lathe cut or a lathe, and that cuts the record essentially in real time. Mm-hmm. So as they're playing, you're getting this record cut. Now, depending on the production level, it's either going to turn out really great or really bad. But lathe cutting records is, as opposed to having them pressed and having like 100 or 200 or 1,000 records, when you lathe cut, you have 5 or you have 20. Or in the case of what we did with the documentary, we have 25 of these records. And that's all that exists.
I'll show you this one crazy. Before you go.
Yeah.
It's
I'd love to see that.
It's cool. It's records are kind of like a special thing.
Yeah. Do you know about these?
No.
So during the record documentary, because of, again, dealing with many producers and having this idea of how your storyline is going to go, there's a few kind of inputs that you get. Well, we decided to, I mean, one of the ideas when I was starting the documentary was to try and do a production of a record so that I understood a little bit of the background or the behind the scenes stuff. Well, again, dealing with our supply and demand and COVID, that kind of changed timelines of how things could be done and how things could be pressed. So I ended up contacting a woman named Robin Raymond. Robin Raymond runs Red Spade Records, and she lathe cuts records. So she will lathe cut stuff out of plastic for you, 7-inch. She's worked with some larger bands, City and Color. And
yeah, I saw the interview with her, and she said she did like 182 for Dallas Green or something like that.
Yeah, and totally obsessive about what she does. But we decided that instead of pressing a split 7-inch, we would try and do a lathe cut split 12-inch with her. So she was going to cut, 2 songs back to back on a 12-inch, but instead of it just being on a piece of plastic, we kind of brought in a little bit of history, and these are actually lathe cut on an X-ray.
On an X-ray?
Yeah. So this is essentially one of 25, but this X-ray is one of one. So you literally have the X-ray, you can touch it. There's nothing on the back there. You can hold that, but take a look through it. So that's a pelvis. Whoa. I don't know whose pelvis it is, but essentially the record is lathe cut on one side of those X-rays. So we produced 25 of those, and essentially each of them are an original because they don't exist in the same X-ray format.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's on? What music is on it?
Age of Wolves and Gypsy Chief Goliath. So through COVID and then kind of after COVID, I did a kind of 2 documentaries, or they kind of filtered into one. Gypsy Chief Goliath is Al Yeti Bones, musician from here in Windsor, and he teamed up with 3 other musicians, and they made Age of Wolves. When they were doing Age of Wolves, that was right during lockdown. So I did a whole documentary about Age of Wolves kind of becoming a band and how the band kind of felt about working with each other and recording stuff and that sort of thing. So as I came into this documentary, I was like, well, if I'm going to learn how to, produce a record or have anything to do with record production, I might as well work with people that I've worked with before. So I grabbed the 2 bands that I knew, really close, and asked them if they'd be willing to kind of, move forward with producing a lathe cut X-ray. And, communication being what it is, I got yeses and I got some didn't know it was going to happen sort of things. But we moved forward, and we took their original recordings. We moved them to another mastering process. So Marty Bach at SLR Studios here in Windsor took those masters from their first recordings, made sure that they were kind of crunched the way they needed to be for vinyl. He sent those off to Robin. Robin did what she did. And then we come out with these 25 pieces, which are, extremely rare and a whole different way of kind of experiencing music.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love doing like things that are just like so many creative ideas, like just like mushed together.
Slammed into one, right?
Yeah, just to make this kind of cool thing. You want to take a break for a second?
I do. I got to pee.
Yeah, me too.
That's what drinking does to you. Mm-hmm. It's pretty interesting kind of, look at the way that the cameras were built.
Yeah. When I first started, it was like Canon, Nikon, and now Sony's been in there for like at least 8 years. Yeah. But now Fuji's like really coming in, and
Fuji, Lumix. Lumix was one that I had to deal with. Fuji, Sony.
I still tell people, like, if you want to do a bunch of different stuff, just buy a Canon.
I just tell people it doesn't matter what you fucking buy, just start doing stuff with it.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, who fucking was it? Can't remember the photographer now. And he stood in front of the class. And somebody asked him what kind of gear he used. And he looked at them and he said, listen, if you were standing in front of Margaret Atwood, would you ask her if she wrote a book with a pen or a fucking pencil? And they're like, oh. And he's like, it doesn't fucking matter. And I was just like, whoa. That was the best thing. It's like, you draw with a pen or a pencil. Does it matter? It doesn't matter what the fucking outcome is. But yeah, like quotes like that in my life are ones that fucking like really resonate with me.
If I only did my personal work, I would shoot Fuji, but I don't. So I shoot Canon. And also, it doesn't even matter. Like, this is the thing. Like, I spent the last few years shooting only film for my personal work. And that's what the new book I'm making is on right now. And then I went to Cuba. And I had all my film packed. And I was like, fuck. I was like, they're not going to hand check this. Because I don't speak Spanish. And we're in Cuba. They don't give a shit. They're putting it through the x-ray. So I can't bring it. So right before I left for the airport, I put my digital camera in. And when I got to Cuba, I switched it to single shooting only. And when I shoot film, because I trust the light meter in the camera, instead of using light meter in the camera and setting the manual, I just shoot in shutter priority. I'm going to trust the camera's meter anyway. Why would I? I'm trusting the meter anyway, so I might as well shoot on semi-automatic. So I just let it do the aperture. So when I got to Cuba, I set my digital camera for the first time ever to shutter priority. And I made a rule I could only take one picture of everything. And I did it, and I came back, and I pulled up 2 photos that had like a lot of different colors in them, one on film and one on digital. And I mimicked all the colors the best I could, and I kind of made a preset, and then I've just been I did all that work.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was like, you know what? A good photo is a good photo, and you can't even tell the difference when they're both good. So I'm back to digital.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, building your presets based off of film, that's fucking great. That's what I love teaching my students. It's like, you can actually like, because when I started shooting film on my camera, there was a guy in California. I bought some kind of raw presets and like log presets off of.
Yeah.
So he would take all the Nikon cameras and then make them as log as he could for video and give you the presets. So I spent like $50 on all these presets. So like, my Nikon D600 versus the D3, like the most professional down to like the most amateur one, started to shoot in line in this fucking beautiful kind of like log format where I was like, oh, this is fucking so great. Mm-hmm. But teaching people how to like, because Nikon had it with one of their NX capture or whatever, where you could actually create a profile. So you could build your own profile and load it into your camera so that you would actually have that JPEG preset to shoot, which is essentially what you're doing post. Mm-hmm. But we could do it straight in camera.
Yeah.
And it was just one of these, like, they opened up their camera for you to like fuck around with. And with Canon, it took a little bit more for a little bit. And then they jumped on too. Cause then there was like somebody, honestly, because the way that the market was too, there's so many people that had Canon. There were people that fucking hacked Canons, like Canon hacks. So like even the fact that this couldn't shoot forever, there were people that hacked the first fucking camera. So they just like blew past the whole, like, 30 minute fucking thing. So, but Canon had that because there were a lot of people that could, well, you can hack a Canon camera different than you can hack a Nikon, because Nikon is 3 corporations. So Canon, like Canon USA or Canon is Canon across the fucking board. But when you deal with Nikon in Europe, and you deal with Nikon in the States, and you deal with Nikon in Japan, each of them holds different technology. Mm. So when the tsunami happened in Japan, they held literally all of the flash technology of how Nikon's flashes were going to TTL and talk to each other wirelessly. So when that tsunami fucking happened and it wiped out Japan, all the Nikon people were fucked for flashes for the next year or 2 years, because it took them that amount of time to catch up, where they don't want to trade. They don't want to trade the information with like Nikon US or this in Germany. Each place had its own kind of like pie of the puzzle that they would handle. So it became in the industry, like there were Nikon people that were like, like fucking at least Canon people were like, at least Canon like knows what the fuck's going on with their company. And it's like, yeah, you're kind of right, but in a way, just fucking weird.
That is weird.
Curious.
Fuji has the built-in film recipes on all their cameras now.
I don't like their menu systems.
I don't like much about I don't know, like I wouldn't shoot with like, so you can pick and it's cool because Fuji actually makes film, unlike Canon, Sony, whatever. But like, so you can pick whatever, it's Fuji Superia 400 and the back of the screen changes to the Fuji Superia 400 box and you can't see it anymore and you're shooting film. But like, I don't know, like some photos look better on other things. Like I'd rather just shoot raw and then use the film recipe afterwards, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I think
kind of
that's
the
the
point of
difference when
digital.
I was like coming back 30 years ago. Like I chose those things, like preconceiving what you shoot versus post-processing what you captured is the difference in technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's it. If I wanted to photograph in, slide film in order to get that kind of like slide film feel, I'd photograph in fucking slide film.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to learn how to photograph correctly with slide film because that was different than shooting on a negative.
Like
And you'd learn
Kodachrome,
that.
is that what you were using?
Like Kodachrome and Ektachrome and all that.
Chrome is $40 a box.
Yeah,
right now.
dude. Yeah. But you also you invested in fucking up.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Like you're pressured to learn because like, am I going to blow another $50, $60 in learning this? Like how much am I going to waste? So
Yeah, I know. Luckily for me is I started on digital, became a professional, and then a few years ago was just like, I'm going to start shooting film. So I didn't really fuck anything up, which was nice because I already knew how to shoot. Maybe I screwed up a little here or there, but like for the most part, I knew enough about photography to not mess up any rolls, which was good. Especially when I started doing it on these trips, like go to California and work my ass off and shoot 20 rolls in a week. Like, thank God I didn't screw any of those up, you know?
Dude, it cost money. Like
Yeah.
it really did. Mm-hmm. And when I flipped from film to digital, I remember just before I was doing that, I had allotted $1,000 a month to shoot, process, and get stuff out for my portfolio, which was doing fashion stuff. And like my friend, who was David Dupre, he was involved in digital photography in the early 90s, like mid 90s. And he's like, buy a fucking digital camera. And we were on a television show together. And he was like, you still shooting that fucking silly film? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, how much did you waste this month? And I was like, $800. And he's like, why don't you fucking stop doing that and we'll go and buy a digital camera? And I was like, David, put your money where your mouth is, man. Like, I don't have the fucking money to throw out for that. And he was the first guy in my life. He's like, done. On Monday, I'm going to go and buy you a digital camera. You'll pay me back with the money you make off the digital camera. And that was the learning. That was the flip. Because what I was shooting with those models and then, trying to produce for my fashion portfolio or whatever, and like spending all that money, there were still models that were coming in to shoot tests and stuff like that. But I was putting all that money back into me shooting to get my portfolio. Mm-hmm. So when I moved to digital, all of a sudden there was no processing fee. I was printing, at a lab a shitload cheaper, and models were coming in and paying me to photograph them, and I was doing tests. Within 2 months, I was like, I'm up like $4,000. And he's like, yep. I paid him back within 4 months of me buying that digital camera. And then it was free after that. And I was like, ding. Like, okay, I get it. But
that was the other thing too, is Kodak doubled their prices in 22 and then again in 23. And when I went on that trip to Cuba, I came back and I didn't have a $600 bill from a film lab for 15 rolls of film, and I didn't have any of the worry of fighting with a TSA agent and
don't push this through the x-ray. Don't do this.
Yeah, I was in Toronto. You know what? TSA in the States have always been good, but in Toronto, this lady wouldn't do it. She's like, nope. And I was like, you're not putting it through the x-ray. I don't give a fuck. It's going through, you're hand checking it. She's like, nope, we can't. And I was like, too bad you're doing it. And I just fought with her and I wouldn't move. And then she finally did it and she was like so mad. She was like throwing my film rolls around. And I was like, man, like, not to mention all the money that costs, because a roll of portraits is like $20 now. And then it's like another 10 to develop and scan. But like, I just put my work into that. Like, that's 36 frames. That's like an hour of shooting. And
worst thing in Toronto, I was leaving. Hang on, I was flying out somewhere and I had like 3 bricks. So was that fucking 10 rolls of film? So I had like 30 rolls of film. And I'm going through the the check at the airport, and they pull it out, and they're like, "What is these?" And I'm like, "Well, this is all film. You can't throw this through the X-ray. Don't do this." And they're like, "How do we know it's film?" And it's like, these are sealed boxes, like sealed. They're sealed boxes.
Like you had some
of film.
pro packs of film unshot.
I hadn't even shot them.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Well, how do I know there's film in there?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you. It's film. Like, call a fucking security guard. They've seen this, or like your superior." She literally cuts open a roll or a brick, grabs a random roll, opens a second brick, grabs a roll, and she's like, "So in these, there's film." And I'm like, "Yep." She's like, "Well, open it and show me." And I'm like, "Okay." So I open it. I'm holding her like a fucking 120. And she's like, "Well, what do I know is in that?" And I'm like, "There's fucking film in it." Like, she's like, "Well, open that." And I'm like, "I can't open it. It's going to destroy the film." And I literally had to like pull two
roll of
full
120?
rolls of 120 and be like, "You've now wasted X amount of money for me, but this is what all this is." And then I like, one of her superiors comes in and is like, "Yeah, blah, 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 blah." And I get pushed through, but it was like, that was the worst thing I ever had. It's like them literally.
At least they weren't shot.
At least
you only
they weren't
lost
shot,
money.
But like, yeah. But fuck, like just the arrogance of those people. Like, what is this? And it's like, it's fucking film.
Especially, I feel like it's worse now because like they don't even know what the fuck film is.
No, they don't.
Like that's the thing I was worried about in Cuba is like I knew that if they ran it through there the whole trip, I'd be like, this is fucking ruined.
Yeah. And I used to shoot 1600.
1600. Oh, like ISO?
ISO.
Like.
Yeah, so it was fucked for X-ray. So you could probably push a 50 or like 100,
or even like 200, yeah,
through an X-ray, and you'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
But I pushed, so I used to shoot T-Max, and then I would push that in Rodinal developer. So I'd shoot it at 16, I'd push it to 32 in my developing, and that would give me this like fucking amazing grain out of film.
Yeah.
But it was like, I knew that if anything had to go through X-ray, it was totally fucked.
Well, one time a lady was like, "No, this can go through its 400 ISO. It's only above that." And I was like, "No, it can't." And then I was like, "What if I push it?" And they're like, "They don't even know what that means." And I was like, "No, it can't because it doesn't matter because I could develop it at 800."
Yeah. No. Fucking hate airports.
Yeah. So I went to. So after I came to this realization in Cuba that I was done shooting film on trips, I still wasn't done my California project, so I had to go there and shoot film when I didn't want to and deal with it all over again.
Such a rough life, right? I have to go to California and shoot this on film.
Oh, I wanted to go to, I had to bring the film and I was like, I just want to shoot on digital so bad for this trip. And I was done with it. But it would make sense.
Yeah.
But I'm done with that project now. So, but you know what? I was talking to myself and I was like, yeah, I kind of want to shoot film again. I miss it.
Yeah. I miss being in a dark room.
I've never done that.
My friend. It's a whole other level of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe one day. Adrian's still kicking around at Photo Outfitters and
yeah. God, I still have development stuff. But I mean, honestly, it's like, I remember, so university was 93 to 99. And we had a dark room that was available to us, so you could like walk in as a photo student, right, any hours of the day. And my friend Sonia Sardana, who also teaches photography here in the city, we would go in on Monday nights, and that's when we develop all of our photos. And that's when WDET would also replay the symphony from Saturday night. So on Monday night, you get the recording from the Saturday night show. So we'd sit in a dark room for like 3 hours and listen to this like live symphony that was recorded like 2 days before. And you're sitting in a dark room and you're listening to water and you're watching your images come up. Like they're
like, you're making prints or are you developing rolls?
Yeah.
You're making prints too?
Yeah, both. Yeah. But that's a whole thing, like watching your print kind of like come up in real time. Like you have a minute and a half and you're watching that whole like photo come up on that piece of paper, and then taking that piece of paper and being like, okay, 1 minute and 45 seconds, stop the developing. And like you have control over so much of this process, from like not only how like what film you loaded in, and what you chose and your settings, but then like the temperature that you developed that film at, what chemical you developed the film in, and then how you developed the paper, like all of these were variables that you were able to change. And I think with digital, like most people don't get the, in the class I say, like, you don't get the disconnect enough. Like you're too connected to the final image. Click, it's right there. That's what it looks like. That's it. And then to take it in a Lightroom and do different things, like all of a sudden you feel like you're deviating from this, or that this photo that looked like this on the back of your camera is true. That it's like this huge kind of falsity. It's like, no, that's just what your sensor recorded. Now what you want to do with this is the rest of the development process. Mm-hmm. And in a camera, when you were dealing with film, there was a disconnect in like, I bought this ISO and I'm going to put this in the camera. And now I only have two tools, shutter speed and aperture, to help me kind of with this exposure. You have so much disconnect between these tools, and you're trying to make them work together, that like you have to touch the camera to make the shutter speed move, and you have to touch the lens to make the aperture move. And now we're dealing with like a wheel, and those sorts of things are like, it's so connected and it's so instantaneous that people don't understand that there's a process that happened between the idea of what you take and the idea of what you're producing.
That's why I think it's good for, like, I think it was good for me to like go to film for a bit, just to feel that process, because now I shoot digitally. Now I shoot digital differently, at least for my personal work. Client with that's a different story, but when I'm shooting my personal work, I definitely shoot differently. Yeah. One photo. Yeah. That's the photo. And if it's really good, like on film, if it's like maybe one photo a roll, you took two, but for the most part, just one. Yeah. Take your time with it. You don't need to take more than one.
There was a series of photos I did when I was in Vancouver before I moved back here, and it was called 30 and 30. So it was 30 frames in 30 minutes. Whichever came first, that's when I'm done. So I would go to a model's house and I'd photograph, no makeup, no bullshit. Just give me the light, let's photograph. And like, if 30 frames come up, I'm finished. Or if 30 minutes come up, then I'm done. So it wasn't like too much commitment on their end, but it was a whole lot of like kind of mental gymnastics, light gymnastics on my end of being like, okay, I've got like 10 minutes to kind of figure out all this setup, figure out what I'm going to shoot with, and then kind of move on. And that was probably one of the coolest things I did, moving digital to kind of feel like film, where it's like I'm locked in on my own kind of constraints onto like how this photo shoot's going to happen.
Yeah, that's super cool. When you did this documentary, who did the editing?
Me.
You did?
Yes.
In what? In Premiere?
Yes, I actually did this. I did this documentary in Premiere.
That's what Gavin says he uses for all his stuff too.
Yeah, I stuck with Premiere because of Gavin.
Did you?
Yeah. I was ready to move. Premiere. I was ready to move out of Premiere.
To what?
DaVinci Resolve. I mean, honestly, again, I think, going to the technical end of things, DaVinci Resolve does what I need to do in most of the documentaries. Like, I cut from one, cut to another. There's a bit of a transition. We can fix color. DaVinci Resolve kind of handles a lot of it. But Gavin is, very much a Premiere-oriented person, which I was as well. I learned DaVinci Resolve after Premiere because there were so many people talking about it. And again, like...
You did learn it? See, I didn't learn it. I already paid for Premiere. I know how to use it. I don't know.
Yeah, but it gets back to that kind of... it's not OCD or ADHD. It's just like, I like to know how to do these things.
Is Resolve better? Is there a difference?
In the final outcome, no. I think it's like the bullshit between a pen and a paper, or a pen and a pencil when you're dealing with paper. I think it's like, it's what you're comfortable editing in and what you're comfortable kind of working with. I've done a few projects in DaVinci, and, I think they exist fine. I've done projects in Premiere and they exist fine. I've now done, this project was kind of between the two. So I did all of my editing in Premiere. That's how Gavin saw it. But then when we moved to color, the color end of adjusting moved to DaVinci. So we actually had to export out of Premiere and into DaVinci. And that's where Travis Latham took control of that and basically made sure that the color end of things was right. So the color kind of correcting, I think, within the program of DaVinci was a little bit easier.
That's what I've heard.
You know, it's more robust. It makes more sense, maybe.
Yeah, because it's weird in Premiere.
It's definitely weird.
It feels like they just like Premiere's great, and then they're just like, oh, they need to be able to color correct, and they just give you something, you know, instead of like
a whole whole other kind of panel within the program. So yeah.
What I do when I need to color correct is I'll take I'll find a screen grab and I'll export it as a PNG, and then I'll bring it into Lightroom and I'll edit it bait like a lot less than you would do a photo. So like if you were to pull the shadows up to a 50, like you're just going to do like 15, you know? And then I there's like the LUT generators. So then you just copy and you paste those settings, and then it creates a LUT, and then you bring it into Premiere, and then you just lay it across all the footage. And that works well, I find. And or at least for like a starting point. Yeah. And then I really only have to like adjust exposure maybe or white balance. But that's what I've done for color correcting, which is a weird way to do it. But
no, I think workflow is like, I don't know. It's this whole hidden world. Like it's like a darkroom. Like what I did in a darkroom is never going to be the same as somebody else. And what I do in Lightroom or my workflow, it's not going to be the same as anyone else.
Yeah, it's funny.
You know, in Vancouver, we had this little joke. It was Lightroom wars or Photoshop wars. So between like, you know, 4 or 5 of us instructors, we would try and, you know, kind of talk and discuss about the different ways that we would come to the end result of this photo. And it was always different. You know, everybody's got a whole different path. Like you learn tools differently. And then like literally sometimes once you learn those tools, they're just ingrained in what you do. So even though the next update in the program is going to be like, oh, you can use this tool differently. You're like, no, I'm totally good at using what I'm using. So you stick with those sorts of things. But I always think that workflow is a really, you know, interesting way. It's super geeky to talk with people about and to kind of see the way that they go about things and the way that you go about them. And then for me, it's always, you know, there's a big gap because I'm colorblind. So I deal with, you know, the way that I read color is totally different than the way you read color. And that ends up being, you know, kind of a weird part of my process, which I'm not sure if it's right or wrong, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is. Like when you have you're done calling and you're going to edit a photo in Lightroom, what's the first thing you do?
Yeah. I don't know. First thing I do in Lightroom is the same thing everybody does in anything. It's like your basic color adjustments or like exposure adjustments. Like that's what I do. But Lightroom only has, I mean, as a program, and it's only got so much depth, kind of like Premiere. It's only got so much depth before you feel like you need to go somewhere else for help. So Lightroom is that, you know, it's a tandem kind of program to help me out to get what I need to get. So, you know, maybe I might go through, you know, 60 to 80% of the editing in Lightroom. And then the last 10 or 20 or 30 is going to be done in Photoshop. And that's very common for me.
For me, the only thing I really do in Photoshop would be removing things. Or maybe a mask, like a dodge or a burn, if it needs to be done better than the one that's in Lightroom, because it's way better. But I try not to cross too much. I don't know, but everybody's so different. It's funny how, see, the first thing I do in Lightroom is I go through my presets, and I'm like, okay, we're doing this one. Copy, paste it on everyone, and then let's dive in, you know?
Yeah, I don't even go there.
No?
No, because if you learn Lightroom from someone who's super lazy, then you would apply those presets at import, so you didn't even have to do that once you were in the fucking program. So, I mean, part of it is
what I want until I look at it. I usually like take the photo and I'll put like 2 or 3 presets on, and then I'll be like, this one wins. And then that's the one that goes with the batch.
Yeah. I think that's interesting, but it's also the way that you kind of, interact with your file.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I'm seeing the presets added to the file, I'll need a secondary set of eyes to be like, okay, is this are we pushing greens here? Is this warm? Is this cool? Like what exactly is this doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because
your green's orange because it's 2019.
Yeah. That piss colored sort of filter that everybody throws on stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing. I definitely need another set of eyes on things. So a little bit of my disability, kind of working with something that's visual, which is, it has been a problem over the years, but it's something you just kind of deal with and overcome.
Can you see colors? You just see them differently?
Just differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
How do you know you have that? Did you used to be able to see them?
No.
Oh.
No. I was always one of those guys that when you were given that colored dot test, it's not the Rorschach test, the one where all the dots and you're supposed to see numbers in the dots. Mm-hmm. I couldn't see some of those. So that was all early on through public school and those sorts of things. I always knew I had trouble with color, but I guess it didn't really stop me.
No shit.
Yeah. No, I think it was the hardest when I got to university and I had to do painting. And I actually had to kind of put stuff on paper and mix pigment. And that was a lot different than, when you're working with something that, I don't know, you don't have a foundation for, you're kind of making up mm-hmm. And then it was also working with oil paintings over a month period of time. So I'd have to kind of remix the color from last week to match what was going on. And that just didn't happen well.
Yeah, that wasn't working out.
No, not at all.
What did you shoot the documentary with? Did you shoot it with Nikons, like DSLRs and mirrorless cameras?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. We shot on everything. There were GoPros. Gavin had, I think he had a Canon kind of documentary camera that he was shooting with. We had a Red on a few episodes.
Are those worth the hype?
No. Yes and no. Yes, because they're freaking amazing, but no in the sense of my documentary, because there were so many cameras that we had to mix after a little while.
It didn't matter.
I mean, well, also you get into issues of whether or not Premiere was going to read the newest Red file or it was going to read the newest Nikon file.
Lightroom had that with the 5D Mark IV when it came out.
Yeah, so you end up with a little bit of lag in what it in the programs that you're in, because the digital stuff comes out and then those programs have to kind of catch up on what the LUTs are or what the RAW is and that sort of stuff. So I ran into problems with a little bit of the higher end Red material because it was just not being translated by the version of Premiere that I was on. So I could have upgraded, but in the middle of a large project over 2 years worth of time, the last thing you want to do is hit that update button. Mm-hmm. You're just I'm kind of set where I'm set and there's a lot of stuff going on. And if I hit that update button right now, what is that going to do to everything else? So that was...
Yeah, that's scary.
It was, there were a couple of updates through Premiere through that time that I was, very, very, very reluctant on being okay, I'll update Premiere at this point in time, or I'll update any kind of, app / operating system. It's once I'm locked into a project, it's we start at this is where we're going to kind of finish. And I'm not going to add in more updates or any more kind of tools to that.
One thing I never do is update my camera body and lenses. Do you do that? Do you update the firmware?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Should I?
It's the foundation your fucking photography house is built on. Yes.
I feel like if it works well and everything's good, what's an update going to do besides create bugs that I don't need to deal with? I don't know. I keep all my programs updated.
Because your digital photography is like wine. You can sit on it. You picked the grape in 1999. You threw it in a fucking basket. Well, in 2003, the idea of how that grape has to be processed is totally different. And in 2010, even that much more different. So I think that these little updates that happen, when I'm teaching and I'm talking to other photographers, I try and keep that stuff updated within the camera, because essentially they're trying to give me the most out of my camera that I can get. Mm-hmm. However, some of these updates may be irrelevant. So let's say you don't do HDR stuff,
which I do,
or right, but those sorts of things. And you're like, well, I'm not going to do that because the update is only about this sort of stuff. So if it's not relevant to your shooting, then what's the important part? But the thing is we have now, this isn't a computer, this isn't a camera in your hand. It's a computer. Mm-hmm. It's a computer with a lens. So if you update your computer, why wouldn't you update your camera?
True.
And there's a whole lot of different language that goes on, and the way that they process things, and even the profiles that they start giving lenses, which is, you kind of mentioned that, early on in 2003 and 4, I was starting to use a thing called X-Rite, which was a color calibration tool based on a Gredig-Macbeth color chart. Gredig-Macbeth was a color chart that you would photograph if you were shooting products, and all the colors on the chart would essentially match, or the world of printing would be matching that color chart. Well, in the early 2000s, they made a pocket color checker based on the Gredig-Macbeth, which you would be able to photograph with your camera, use an app to create a profile so that the color of your camera and the color of your lens was actually shooting properly. So the difference between you shooting name the camera, let's say I'm shooting on a D4, but if I'm shooting on a D4 with a lens that's a 24-70 built in 1990 something, that is different than me shooting with a lens of an 85 that was built in 1973. They bend light differently. Mm-hmm. So, it becomes really, really, really interesting when you start getting into color and you're talking to a colorblind guy about this, but it's really crazy. That I can profile and program my camera or my apps afterwards to read the camera that I'm shooting with, read the lens that I'm shooting with, read the aperture that I'm shooting with, and color correct all of that information based on that metadata information. So, light is energy, which is one thing, and it's photons, which is a physical thing. So this is two different things in the world that we work with. And it's weirdly scientific and magical at the same time. We can see most of the light, but there's a physical part of the light that we can't see. And that's the stuff that these profiling programs and the way that your lens kind of bends light, that's the physical stuff that deals with color and it deals with light. That's really interesting. The way that your sensor captures it, that's another thing. The sensor is capturing the way the light was bent through the lens, and that is kind of a factor of the glass itself. It's a factor of physicality, of the way that the lens was bent. That's a whole other thing than the way that your sensor is capturing it. So, when we kind of get into digital photography and everyone's again, I think I kind of know how to handle this. It's well, let me throw this on you. So toss this old lens on your system. Why does this color of the sky look different on this lens than it looks on this lens? And I think that's that's the interesting kind of tech talk about, cameras and all that sort of stuff. So, when we were dealing with the documentary and using different cameras and different lenses, that's the problem that sort of comes up in the final product. How do you make those cameras all look like they're shooting in the same environment, that they're shooting the same color? And that's why Travis Latham is there.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. That's a whole other thing. That's a different career path. That's
oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
To be able to color correct like that. There's only a few people around that can do it. Gearheads. Mm-hmm. Which I'm not
people with eyes that are different than mine.
Yeah. You're definitely not doing that stuff to their degree.
I can compose the shit out of anything. Don't ask me to color correct it.
I have one final question for you. For the drive article that you were featured in for Spinning Stories, who took your pictures? You take yourself?
Half and half. So the picture of me holding the stack was all done by me.
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say, because like I didn't take it.
No.
And so you took it of yourself.
I did.
Because I guess Trevor could have taken it.
No. Trevor did the photograph of the article. So Trevor Booth shot kind of me sitting in my environment with all the records around me. A few other shots. I don't think those were in the article, but the poster was all shot by me. Again, a little bit of a kind of geekiness about to it. I had to stack the records onto a table. I photographed those records. I photographed me, and then I photographed me holding the records, and it's kind of an amalgamation of about 4 or 5 shots.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool. Self-portraits are so hard.
It's the way to go.
I do them sometimes here and there. Like I've done self-portraits, but it's a pain.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
The thing is, it's like, being in front of the camera. When I taught in Vancouver, one of my full-time classes, I would make them photograph self-portraits. So every week they would have to come in and show 7 self-portraits every single week. And then at the end of the month, they would have to show the 4 best self-portraits that they shot that month. And at the end of the semester, then they'd have to show the 5 or 6 best self-portraits from that series. And I think that, I don't know, kind of like shifting the lens onto yourself makes you feel a whole lot different. And then, kind of looking at yourself and trying to evaluate how like one is better and one is not better is a different thing, because you're looking at yourself, which is...
Yeah, you have to look at the photo.
That's totally kind of weird. And then at the end of the semester to realize like, okay, I've got to come up with 5 images that actually speak to what my self-portraits are over the X amount of time. That's then a whole different level of things. So I think the self-portrait's a pretty interesting thing. And, we talked about some of the photographs or the books that you have. Like there's a Helmut Newton photograph that, really resonates in my head of him getting an operation and photographing himself in a mirror. And it's him after an operation. And, he's obviously, he's way more famous for doing nudes and kind of fashion stuff and that sort of stuff. Like turning the camera on yourself wasn't something that he was doing. And when he did, it's really interesting to kind of hear his talk about, kind of what the camera is and what the camera does after you kind of turn that on yourself. And I think that learning that is the most beneficial thing when you have your camera pointed at someone else that either doesn't feel right or they're not sure how they're looking or they're looking for a little bit of confidence. You understand that kind of vulnerability being in front of the camera yourself. Yeah, for sure. Or when you have to have another photographer photograph you for whatever reason. And yeah, thank you, Trevor Booth. Yeah, you photographed me like 6 years ago. My God, I know. And I actually look at that photo and I can't believe how long your fucking legs are. But that's what an 18 mil lens does with a body your size. My hair was still long there too. It was. And I my God, it's right there. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Look at how long your fucking legs are right there. You look like a goddamn insect. But that's how I used to shoot a lot. Like I loved wide angle lenses. I love that. And I couldn't, going back to this documentary and stuff, like it just doesn't, someone that doesn't read the same way in video. But I love that lens. It's funny all the places your photographs are and you don't even realize like your photo's hanging up in here. Yeah. Like I know. Neither of us even really realized it until in all the other great photos. There's my little piece of whatever over there. It's just funny how many weird places like your photographs are, It's just that's like I'll be someone who'll be like, hey, that's mine. Yeah. That's weird. Yeah. One of my more famous, the most published photo I have is the 2 circus sideshow guys on top of a roller coaster. One of them is tattooing the other one, but it's in a Ripley's Believe It or Not book or the Guinness World Record. I don't even know which one of it is, but it literally is like been published all over the world. So if we went into like a bookstore and pulled out like the Ripley series from like X amount of year. It's like, it's right there on the back cover of this magazine or the book. It's a hardcover book. So yeah, like sometimes it just blows me away to think about where the photographs are. I walked into the Ripley's Museum in Niagara Falls.
It was in there?
Well, there's 2 of them in there. It kind of blew me away. They weren't, not those ones, different ones. Different ones, actually. But yeah, sometimes you're walking around, you're like, whoa, I had no clue that this was here.
Well, so for me, Goran, the real estate agent, his billboard. Yeah, I took that in here right where we're sitting. Yeah. So I see that all the time, everywhere I go. But yeah, like I took that, and it's, it's cool. Like when you see your stuff everywhere like that, it's pretty interesting.
It is.
I also learned that my photos can definitely be blown up on a billboard.
Wow. I could tell you secrets about that. You don't have to worry about your digital camera for that. You got a lot of room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People don't realize the quality. Like those portraits that are on the billboard of him that are crystal clear as day are shot at medium raw.
Yeah.
They weren't even shot at full raw.
Yeah.
And they're on a 50-foot billboard around the whole city.
Yeah.
Like it's...
Well, get close to a billboard with like a car on it, and you'll realize how much pixelation or DPI those photos have.
Really?
When you stand back 200 meters, 300 meters from a huge billboard, it looks great, but don't get close to it. Don't get close to it at all.
Now I gotta go climb one. I want to see. I want to see exactly how it is. That's funny. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's a long one. You got anything else to say?
No.
None
at all. Honestly, no. I mean, I know after this is finished, people have probably seen the screening here in Windsor. So I appreciate that you've given me the time. I appreciate the sponsors for the whole event. So should I list them out right now?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So obviously the Drive magazine, which we've talked about, we both work for. So thank you very much. The Drive magazine, Leon is 625. So they helped kind of sponsor the event so that we could have the event be free. That was a big thing for me, is like, I don't need to make money off of this. There is money, there are sponsors, and we get to kind of put this event out for the community. So Leona helped out with that. The Drive helped out with that. Langemann Heating and Cooling, which is my brother. The Center for Cities, again, a kind of odd offshoot, but we talked about like the community behind record stores and behind music and how that's important to cities, which I think is super important because people kind of forget about these small businesses sometimes. The Downtown BIA, so they kind of jumped in on sponsoring. Not only do they have the Capitol Theater in there, but Dr. Disc is kind of like within their realm, and the Canadian Mental Health Association. So it was really important that after everything that went through with the documentary, with losing Dave, that they've kind of been, the charity that is there to help out other people who might be going through a little bit of mental health issues, might be just going through some struggles and realizing that, they aren't alone. There's other people out there to help. So I was really, really happy that they kind of came on board and they were willing to kind of be part of this. So there were a lot of people that made this event a pretty successful thing. And honestly, it blows me away at this point in time when, I started this a couple of years ago and thought that it was like, just like you kind of think it's like your own little personal project and you're going to do stuff. And then all of a sudden you realize there's this like, there's a whole wave of other people behind you that are really supporting the whole thing. So yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate all the record stores and the collectors and people that kind of came together to make this documentary what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where are people going to be able to watch it like after the premiere?
Well, right now, Bell 5 TV1 kind of has the exclusivity on airing this. We are looking at an American channel, and we're also looking at a couple of airlines. So within Canada, if you're flying, you get to not only watch a movie, but if you get to the end of your flight and you realize you're not going to see another movie, you can just turn on a couple episodes of Spinning Stories. So we're hoping that this kind of gets out there. The idea is that eventually we'll be on YouTube. It'll be out there for everybody. But right now we're just kind of, playing a little bit of the game
Yeah.
trying to make sure that we get some distribution around different areas and get people interested.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. High five.
That's a good ending.